Everything Not Saved Will Be Lost Part 2 is the 6th instalment in the back catalogue of the Oxford-based Foals. We spoke at length the other day about Part 1 and how much of an epic album it was. Part 2, very, very different, still absolutely deserves to be on this list. If you've been watching these videos over the past few days, and you'll know I'm going through my favourite albums of the year, starting with Foals, believe it or not. We've also spoke about the Amazons, Slow Tie and the SLP, other albums to follow as well. And so what I'd like to do is just go through this album track for track and talk about what I love, what I don't love, and we can just go on further about it. Like its predecessor, this one also is produced by lead singer Yannis, and where the first album kind of went back to their earlier roots, this one follows more of their kind of more recent sound. It's probably heavier than anything they've put out before. It is very, very different. The first record, Red Desert, similar to their previous album, starts the cinematic part of the album off. This one, rather than sounding kind of western and cowboy-esque or anything like we've talked about in other videos, this one kind of sounds almost like a bit of a horror film. And whilst this one's supposed to be more of a kind of a rockier, heavier sound, this opening track kind of lends itself to more of the electronic experimentation that Yannis has been doing as part of his own stuff, and provides itself as a wonderful little intro to, or prelude to, The Runner, track 2. Track 2, The Runner, was the second single they released and feels a lot more... You know, it's funny, this was supposed to be the heavy album, the first album was supposed to be the kind of groovy electro indie album, but this feels like they've just taken something that's kind of funk-esque like My Number or Cassius and added just a heavy guitar over the top and a bit more shouting, but it's a great, great record. I can't wait to hear this live. This is going to be epic live. A record that I gravitate to and go back and listen to over and over again. The Runner is absolutely, without a doubt, one of the records of the year. It's brilliant. We then move into the record Wash Off, which again, bearing in mind this is supposed to be the heavy album, starts with a very classic, picky kind of Foals riff, but has this wonderful offbeat kind of dancey drum break. This feels like something that I can see Josh Homme dancing to in the desert, like he talks about. I'm talking about Josh Homme a lot today. We talked about him in the last video about the Amazons, but it absolutely feels like something that it would be dancing along to. And yeah, I don't think you can listen to this without bobbing your leg a little bit. It's one of those records that's just really, really exciting and full of energy. The problem is that this is part 2 of a big project. So by the time you hear this record, you're like, yeah, it's cool. But you've had a lot of Foals this year, so unless you're kind of brand new to them, then this would just sound like anything else. Had this been a year break or 2 years, I think we would be in love with this record. Absolutely in love with this record. The next record, Black Bull, is by far the heaviest thing that they've put out. Maybe Inhaler's heavier, I don't know. But it is certainly a big record with a lot of low end and a lot of bass. This was the first thing they released from this project. They put out a YouTube video, and then Annie Mac had it on her show, but it's a record that takes no prisoners. This sounds like old Iggy Pop. I mean, it feels like Guy Ritchie would have used this on the soundtrack for Lock, Stock or Snatch had it been around at the time. You know, you can see that Yannis is letting everything out that he's got on this one. It's a classic example of why bassists and drummers communicate the way they do. It lends kind of some of the kind of backing vocals from tracks like Exits before going into just a monster of a chorus. God, I can't wait to see this. The pits are going to be mad because it's such a beefy record. Pardon the pun. The next record, Like Lightning, starts with a kind of awkward guitar screech before going into something a bit more kind of, again, dancey, bluesy, I don't know. But then when that guitar kicks in, you know that it's not joking around. This sounds very Foals. It's familiar, but it's so new and fits in with the progression of where I feel they were trying to go with this album. It feels a little bit like they've listened to people like Justice and Daft Punk, moving into that kind of bigger, bolder sound, but recreated it as a band. Again, another record, it's at that perfect bounce tempo. This is designed for Brixton Academy, this record. It would be absolutely amazing to see live. The next record starts to slow it down a little bit with the record Dreaming Of, which opens with this wonderfully relaxed and beautiful synth part with some kind of droning backing vocals in the background. And I guess this, you know, Foals can do slow and beautiful and ballady and emotive. You just listen to tracks like Stepson or Spanish Sahara, London Thunder, you know, they can do those records well. This feels a bit more heavier than those, but in context of the rest of the album is probably the slow number. I think everyone was so happy with part 1 that they've forgotten to go and listen to part 2. And I think that will be everyone's biggest mistake, because just listening to this again, it sounds so good. It's such a good record. It's not boring in any way. It's another Foals album. You just got 2 of them in 1 year. And I think maybe there's a lot of people doing that at the moment, and it'll be interesting to see how that pans out in terms of popularity in the future. Is that just like something that's on trend? How do you get people more excited for the second part? I don't know. Start listening to a double album and actually going to disc 2. Although Biffy's disc 2 is very good. We then move on to the track Carrier, which is another small interlude at 43 seconds. This one with a lot of reverb piano and just kind of slows everything down so you're ready for the next track. Again, I'm a big fan of when albums do this. This time moving into the track 10,000 Feet, which again is low and distorted, but much slower. Yannis moving for a more high-pitched vocal on this one. By this point, we've had nothing but big records, so something a bit slower. It's not like boring by any means. There's very intricate in its kind of sound design. There's a lot going on. It's still crazy distorted guitars, and the drums are doing all sorts. It's just a bit more kind of chuggy, and the verses are slow and kind of they have lots of space. Choruses big and loud, but not kind of as in your face as other tracks on this record. The second to last track on this album is Into the Surf, which, if you had listened to part 1, is the follow on from Into the Surf, or Surf Part 1, I think it is. By the time you get to this, you're looking for something similar to that Spanish Sahara or London Thunder or Stepson. You know, those records that Foals do so well. They're kind of slow and epic and cinematic. Cinematic's a phrase I'm using on a lot of this. Clearly I need to expand my vocabulary. But it's the only way I can talk about this. It takes the themes from that first record, especially some of those motifs. I think it's like a piano that's being looped with a lot of reverb. It adds it in, making it so familiar to something that's brand new. It's just so genius. And then builds into this amazingly epic song. I think Laura and I, this is one of the highlights on the album for us. We absolutely love this record. I can see them carrying on this live, and it's great. I mean, when have you ever had a trailer for a song in an album where it came into the next one? I mean, in the Bring Me the Horizon album, you had a callback, but you don't have a call forward ever. That's never happened that I'm aware of. It's almost like they wrote this song, moved some of the ideas into the first album so that it was ready for this. I just think it's a very clever concept. The track is also amazing. It's so good. And the last record on this album is Neptune, sending the album off beautifully into the night. This one again feeling like Yannis is just being a bit more epic. Personally, I think I would have put Into the South as the final track. I think it would have ended really, really nicely there. I mean, it's a big, big Foals record. Some of these records feel a little bit like this should have been an EP and they've added stuff to it. Is this as good as Into the Surf or Black Bull or The Runner, or is this here? Is it just filling out part 2 because they had too many songs to release one album? I don't know. Perhaps they could have released 3 EPs rather than 2 albums. Who knows? I don't think that this is a track that I'll go back to and listen just because I love it, like I have with nearly every other Foals song ever released. That doesn't mean it's a bad album by any means. It's still better than a lot of the tit that's out there already. And both of these albums were produced by Yannis, and I think that says a lot. I spoke a lot about how I'd like to see Serge working with other artists. I would love to see Yannis now work with other artists. I think there's some wonderful bands out there. I think, you look at bands that were kind of up on the come up a few years ago. People like Foals and Bombay. Let's add Kasabian into that for an example. Josh Homme at Queens of the Stone Age, Alex Turner of Arctic Monkeys. These are people that are very good at what they do. I'd love to see them move into a more creative production kind of role, I would love to see people working with other artists and bringing them up. You know, I was listening to The Big Moon the other day, and they remind me so much of the Pixies, but I'd love to see them be produced by someone like Yannis. That would be absolutely amazing. Imagine him sharing his ideas with them and their sound. I think it's all great that people are producing themselves, but I also think collaborations are one other thing as well. And I'd love to see people move into that on an album level. When you start to see amazing producers work with amazing bands, you get amazing results. You know, you look at the Justin Timberlake and Timbaland, you look at Pharrell and Justin Timberlake for that matter, that would be amazing. That was amazing. When Mark Ronson produced Queens of the Stone Age album, also then you have Josh Homme producing AM for Arctic Monkeys. You get people, I mean, Rick Rubin works with everyone, obviously, but he also does some stuff I don't particularly like. You get people like Danger Mouse working with a plethora of different artists like the Black Keys, and then working with Michael Kiwanuka, and it makes complete sense. I would like to see more of these kind of super musician tag teams happening. I think that there's some wonderful pairings that could happen out there. Like, yeah, I just hope that happens, if I'm honest with you. I would really love to see what happened if people would start to do that more. And Yannis, I don't even know who I'd pair him with at the moment, but let's have that as a conversation for the future. What do you think about part 2 of Everything Not Saved Will Be Lost? Did you listen to it? Did you prefer it to part 1? Did you not? Have you managed to see them at all in the last year? I'd love to know your thoughts on this one. I really love it as an album. I really do. If it had been released and part 1 hadn't been released, it would be one of my favourite albums of the year. I don't think it's as strong as part 1, but it's not been out as long, so I haven't listened to it as much. And I prefer the artwork for part 1, so I'm visually drawn to that one more. Let me know your thoughts in the comments section below as always, and I will see you in the next one. Cheers, bye.